CBS Young and the Restless spoilers. Noah's disappearance from Nice was not just a missing piece in the puzzle of the Newman family, it became the spark for one of the darkest and most unnerving stories to surface in recent memory. One that exposed the vulnerability of even the strongest bloodlines and revealed that strength is measured not by how well you avoid pain but by how you survive it. For weeks, whispers circulated around the absence of the Newman heir in a city where so many eyes should have caught even a fleeting glimpse of him. The speculation spread like wildfire. Had he chosen to vanish? Had he been silenced by forces seeking revenge against his family? Or had he simply fallen into one of those dangerous traps that seemed to stalk every member of the Newman clan? The truth, however, was far more brutal than any whispered theory. It was a tale of captivity, endurance, and the harrowing escape of a man too stubborn to die and too resilient to surrender. The early signs that something was wrong began when Noah failed to appear at public events where his presence had been all but guaranteed. Nice, a glittering backdrop of wealth and glamour, became the stage where his absence screamed louder than any spoken word. I searched, rumors swelled, but no one could provide a definitive answer. The truth was that Noah had been dragged into a nightmare few could imagine, a secret abduction, orchestrated not in haste but with cold calculation. His captors knew what they were doing. He was confined to a subterranean chamber, a foul-smelling bunker of stone and rusted iron, hidden beneath the weight of an abandoned property where no passerby would ever suspect the presence of a prisoner. His world became darkness, the stench of mildew and sweat, the taste of iron in the air, and the knowledge that his fate had been stripped from his hands. For most men, that kind of confinement would have been enough to break the spirit. The physical torment was compounded by the psychological warfare of isolation. Days blurred together, punctuated only by the echo of footsteps, the mocking laughter of faceless guards, and the cruel uncertainty of whether rescue would ever come. Yet Noah was not most men. The Newman bloodline carries with it a legacy of survival, sharpened over decades of conflict, betrayal, and loss. Bound, bruised, and bleeding, Noah did not allow despair to root itself in his mind. Instead, he sharpened his will, studying his captors' routines, memorizing every creak of the floorboards above, every change in the rhythm of guards delivering food or checking restraints. The pain became secondary, the focus shifted to escape. He understood that if he remained passive, he would die in that hole, and his family would never know the truth. The opportunity came not in a burst of heroics but in the subtle oversight of those who underestimated him. A loosened restraint, a guard too careless with a key, a moment when footsteps faded just long enough for him to force his battered body into motion. Noah's escape was ugly, brutal, desperate. Crawling through filth, cutting himself on jagged metal, scraping skin against stone walls, he clawed his way into the unknown above. Every movement tore at wounds, every breath seared his lungs, but he kept pushing, guided by the raw instinct to live. Emerging into the night, he collapsed into shadows, too weak to run but strong enough to conceal himself until the chance came to climb into the back of a transport truck bound for Paris. The journey was hellish, every jolt of the vehicle rattling his broken body, but the truck became his salvation. By the time it rolled into the city, Noah had transformed from prisoner into ghost unseen and traceable, but alive. What separated Noah from true freedom was not distance but direction, and in the fog of Paris he carried with him one anchor, the knowledge of where his parents were staying. That thought alone was enough to propel him forward, limping through the streets like a man half dead yet fueled by something stronger than pain. He knew Sharon and Nick were his destination, that their presence would be both the relief and the reckoning he needed. The moment of arrival, however, was not the triumphant reunion of cinematic fantasy but a devastating confrontation with reality. When Sharon and Nick opened the door to find their son standing before them, they were met not with the polished figure they remembered but with a man transformed by suffering. His clothes hung in tatters, shredded and stained. His skin bore the story of every wound, every lash of captivity, every obstacle overcome. His eyes, once so quick to brighten, were shadowed by exhaustion but still alight with the undeniable spark of survival. For Sharon, the sight of Noah in that state was shattering. The maternal instinct to shield her child collided with the unbearable truth that he had already endured what no mother should ever witness. Nick, too, was struck by the gut-wrenching mix of horror and relief at the brutality his son had endured. Relief that he was alive and standing, however unsteady. The shock lasted only seconds before instinct took over. They rushed him into their arms, their fear erupting into action as they guided him swiftly into medical care. The urgency was not just about healing physical wounds but about saving the son they almost lost, about reclaiming the family bond that had been torn apart by forces still lurking in the shadows. The hospital became both sanctuary and battlefield. Doctors swarmed, nurses moved with precision, and every bandage wrapped around Noah's body was a reminder of the war he had survived. Yet as his body began to heal, the questions deepened. Who had taken him? Why had he been targeted? Was this an isolated act of revenge or a carefully calculated assault on the Newmans as a whole? The lack of answers was almost as unbearable as the sight of his injuries. Noah's survival was miraculous, but it left behind a trail of mysteries that could not be ignored. His escape may have freed him physically, but it did not remove him from the grip of the unseen enemy who had already proven their reach and cruelty. And this is where the true danger lies. Noah's return, while a relief to Sharon and Nick, was not the end of the nightmare but the beginning of a more insidious threat. His captors would not simply shrug at their failure. Their silence since his escape suggested not weakness but recalibration. They had tested the Newmans, drawn blood, and revealed that even the strongest family line could be fractured. Now they would regroup, watching, waiting, and planning their next strike. The scars on Noah's body were not just reminders of survival but warnings carved into flesh, proof that the enemy was ruthless enough to strip him of dignity and nearly of life. For Noah, recovery meant more than physical healing. It demanded the strength to confront the trauma of captivity, the nightmares that clawed at him even in safety, and the burden of knowing that his ordeal was not random but deliberate. His family rallied around him, Sharon's compassion, Nick's determination, but each of them knew the storm was not over. Victor would demand answers, Adam would exploit them, Victoria would strategize, and all the while the specter of Noah's captors would loom like a shadow over the Newman dynasty. The son who vanished in Nice and re-emerged in Paris was no longer the same man. He was forged anew, tempered by suffering, and prepared to face the battle that awaited not just him but every Newman tied to the name that carried power, enemies, and danger in equal measure. What makes Noah's story so haunting is not just the resilience he displayed but the inevitability of what comes next. Genoa City is not kind to those who escape the abyss. The abyss tends to follow them back, reminding them with every step that freedom comes at a cost. Noah's emergence from that hellish captivity is a victory, but it is laced with dread, because survival in this world is never the endgame. It is only the prologue to the next war, and the blood of the Newmans ensures that war will never be far behind. Noah's reappearance, battered but unbroken, was only the beginning of the storm that would rip through Genoa City and beyond. The ordeal he endured in that fetid chamber beneath Nice had left him scarred, but not silent. If anything, his captivity clarified the truth. Someone had orchestrated his disappearance, and all roads led back to Claire and the shadowy allies surrounding her. To the world, Claire had fashioned herself as a complex, even misunderstood figure, an outsider trying to carve her place within the Newman orbit. But Noah, hardened by what he saw and heard while hidden from the public eye, knew the mask concealed a predator. To him, Claire was no victim of circumstance. She was the architect of a scheme that threatened not only his life but the unity of his family. The whispers he carried were not baseless suspicions, they were rooted in evidence gleaned during his captivity. Noah had overheard conversations, fragmented but telling, while being shuffled from one hiding place to another. He had glimpsed documents left carelessly inside, coded exchanges that referenced financial transfers, and even digital recordings on devices that his captors underestimated he could access. Piece by piece, he had stitched together a tapestry of betrayal that pointed directly to Claire. She was not merely testing her place in the Newman family, she was systematically unraveling it, pitting members against each other, fueling distrust, and weakening the dynasty from within. The genius of her plan lay not in direct assault but in corrosion, slow, insidious, and devastating. Noah's revelation, however, came with an explosive twist. The very people who chained him in that subterranean dungeon may not have been strangers at all but allies of Claire, working to silence him before he could expose her machinations. The idea that his abduction was less about random vendetta and more about strategic silencing added a layer of menace that chilled even the most seasoned Newman. If Claire truly had orchestrated his disappearance, or worse, if she had merely stood by while her allies did it, then her role as the family's saboteur was no longer speculation but fact. For Noah, the cost of silence had already been paid in blood. Now, back in the world, he was determined to make sure that cost was not paid in vain. Ka's reaction to Noah's disclosures was one of pure shock. When Noah presented fragments of his evidence, financial inconsistencies tied to shell companies, cryptic emails intercepted from an encrypted server, and whispered names overheard during his captivity calls, disbelief gave way to alarm. He had always seen Claire as troubled but salvageable, a young woman with ties to Genoa City that could be reformed with enough patience. But the picture Noah painted was of something darker, a woman less interested in redemption and more intent on destruction. Kyle, already navigating his own fragile web of trust, found himself rattled. The evidence wasn't hearsay, it was precise, traceable, damning. For a man like Kyle, who prized facts over speculation, Noah's revelations felt less like conspiracy and more like prophecy of disaster. And then came the most dangerous revelation of all, the mysterious connection between Claire and Holden. On the surface, Holden was a shadow, an enigmatic figure who floated into the orbit of Genoa City with no clear agenda, an outsider whose intentions seemed blurred. Yet the evidence Noah hinted at suggested a bond between Holden and Claire that was more than casual, more than coincidental. Were they partners, lovers, co-conspirators? Noah's fragments suggested a relationship built not on affection but on mutual ambition. Their communications revealed patterns of coordination, discussions that aligned with the timing of Newman family crises, and cryptic references to breaking the circle, a phrase that, to Noah, symbolized nothing less than dismantling the Newmans from within. For Noah, the mission was clear: expose Claire, shine light on Holden's role, and prevent their corrosive alliance from further devouring his family. His anger, once tempered by exhaustion, now burned hot. He was tired of secrecy, tired of the manipulation, tired of watching his family be picked apart by those who smiled in their faces while plotting their ruin. He carried his wounds like armor, his pain like a weapon, and he was ready to unleash both if it meant ensuring the Newman name survived. The danger, of course, was that in doing so, he risked igniting a war that would consume not just Claire and Holden but everyone tied to them. The stage was set for confrontation, and Genoa City would not be the same once Noah pulled back the curtain. The question was no longer whether Claire was guilty but how far her influence had already spread, how deep Holden's shadow stretched, and whether the evidence Noah held would be enough to destroy them or whether it would merely trigger a retaliation more deadly than the first.